The truth is out there. Knowledge is power. This is the Prepper Podcast Radio Network.
Are you sick and tired of having your First Amendment harassed or censored on Facebook? Use no more, as we now have a new alternative to Facebook. It's called Awareness Act. Awareness Act is a social network designed for patriots, to be used by patriots, and is ran by patriots. Stand up and help in the fight to protect your constitutional rights. Patriots can create pages, blogs, videos, documents, articles, and so much more. We even have a unique news feed system that allows you to share, read, or connect with any patriot on Awareness Act. We are a dedicated tool for patriots to use against the tyranny our Constitution is facing. So if you're tired of having your rights infringed upon, come check us out at www.awarenessact.com. Again, that is www.awarenessact.com, the social network for patriots, not potatoes.
Whether you take me for the fool, I know that I can be. Whether you see me eye to eye.
Are you storing food? Many preppers are storing food for months and years, but only have enough fuel stored for days or weeks. Stretch your fuel storage by harnessing the power of the sun with a sun oven. Food can be baked, boiled, or steamed at temperatures of 360 to 400 degrees Fahrenheit with the power of the sun. Depending on where you are located, you can use the sun for 50 to 80% of your cooking, allowing you to preserve your fuel storage for rainy days. Sun-baked foods stay moister and have less shrinkage and don't burn. Sun-baked roasts are tastier and more succulent, and sun-baked bread has unparalleled taste and texture. Water can be heated in a sun oven for purification or personal hygiene. For the past 25 years, sun ovens have been proudly made in the U.S. They are durable, have a long life, and come with a 100% satisfaction guarantee. For a discount coupon, email podcast@sunoven.com. That's podcast@sunoven.com.
Have you ever wanted to generate your own supply of electrical power, even save money on your electric bill? If so, this is going to be the most important message you will ever hear. Solar power generators are now available. These emergency backup systems provide life-saving electrical power when you need it most. Unlike gas generators, a solar generator runs quietly, emits no fumes, and produces electricity from the sun. It's like having an electric power plant running quietly in your own home. Run sump pumps, shortwave radios, computers, and even keep your food from spoiling. Whether it's hurricanes, ice storms, brownouts, or blackouts, you'll never suffer through painful power outages again. And here's the best news, a remarkable fall truckload sale going on right now that gets you $1,700 in bonuses when you buy a solar generator. To find out why solar generators are the best generators and get $1,700 for doing so, go to falltruckloadsale.com. That's falltruckloadsale.com. Generate your own supply of electricity. Go to falltruckloadsale.com. That's falltruckloadsale.com.
This is KPRN-DB, broadcasting worldwide from Southeast Oklahoma, USA to parts unknown.
All right, so welcome back. Here we are with another episode of the podcast, and we've talked about water so far and preparedness in general, some of the awareness and stuff that you can do. Again, to remind people who weren't already tuned into these last few episodes or haven't listened to them, what we're doing here is kind of presenting a scenario in the sense that it's something that everybody can kind of relate to, hopefully, if not now, at some point in their lives. They have lived in an urban area. So the scenario is basically if you're in an urban area and you only have somewhere between $50 and $100 disposable income per month, but you're really interested in getting into preparedness stuff. And by disposable income, by the way, I mean literally disposable income. So you've already paid your bills, you've done all the things, you've taken your kids to all the amusement parks, you've done all the stuff that's fun stuff, you've got cable TV, all that stuff, but on top of that, you've still got money. So I'm not even talking about, stuff that you could do without. I'm just talking about extra money that you've got to spend. And maybe it's only $20 a month. But the point is that this scenario is designed, or the idea behind it is to just, let people relate to the fact that you don't have to spend a lot of money in order to be able to start becoming prepared for either a short emergency, a short disaster, a 72-hour thing, something that lasts a weekend, or something that stretches into a much longer period of time. For instance, again, go back to the example of Hurricane Katrina. And when it happened, I'm sure most people were thinking it was a 72-hour emergency. So these are all just, ways that you can do that, and kind of trying to present sort of a blueprint as we go through some of the different survival necessities that you need. So today, again, with Dr. Paul Range and myself, we're going to talk. We're going to move into the topic of food and preparedness in regards to food. And so, I think with that, I'm just going to let Paul take it away and talk about what he wants to, and we'll just kind of let the conversation go where it needs to. All right, welcome again, Paul, and good to have you here again.
Thank you, Sam. Well, of course, if you've only got $20 to $50 a month disposable income to spend, especially on the food end of the thing, probably the easiest and the simplest and the quickest thing to do is to buy red beans and rice, or pinto beans and rice. They're fairly cheap in the grocery store. You can catch them on sale at H-E-B quite a few times. And the beans and the rice together make a complete protein. So you've got the chance there by buying, say, 5 or 10 pounds of being able to feed your family. Now, I mean, there's always the argument that, beans and rice are pretty boring. You can eat beans for a couple of days, and then you can eat rice for a couple of days, and then you can eat beans and rice for a couple of days, and, you're pretty tired of beans and rice. But after a couple of days of nothing to eat, well, beans and rice taste really pretty good. And so that's just a basic start to it. And I always recommend people starting out to buy dry goods. One of the things that you really need to do and really need to think about when you're buying food for storage is you really need to eat what you store and store what you eat. But just getting started with the beans and rice is a way to ensure your family that they can eat through any crisis, whether it be a hurricane or interruption of service or even a downturn in the economy and you lose your job. So, you can start off with a lot of dried type goods. From that point on, say the next month, I would go to a little more lentils and then go maybe toward some more wet type goods. A friend of ours, Joe, the other day ran across an extremely good deal on canned corn, creamed corn, that was going out of date in 4 or 5 months. But of course, we all know it's still good for several years. And we bought a half a pallet of that stuff. And, of course, we use that not on a daily basis, but at least on a weekly type basis. What's your experience with the food storage, Sam?
Well, I was actually going to ask you a little bit more about storing the corn. You kind of already mentioned lentils, but that just to kind of go back on nostalgia road here, when you were mentioning that, I remembered being a college student a long time ago, longer than I'm going to say how long it was, but I lived literally on lentils, beans, and corn, lentils, rice, and corn as a staple, probably 5 to 6 days a week, and it was very, it was a very balanced, nutritious, food that I think my grocery bill was maybe $20 a month, a week. I mean, maybe that's even stretching it, and that was including fruits and stuff like that. Of course, fruits and vegetables. That was pretty much mostly what I ate. I didn't have. I'm trying to remember if there was anything else really there, but I think that's a fairly balanced meal. Like you mentioned already, it's not exactly the most, exciting to our taste buds, after time. But again, back to the fact that we're in a survival or a preparedness mode, and it's either that or starve. It probably tastes pretty good in that regard. What I wanted to ask you about actually too was just to maybe get into some details about storing the food for longer periods of time. Some of the tricks and tips in regards to storing this food. Not necessarily even canning, but just dried food. Say I want to store the stuff for a year or 2 years. What's a good way to do that?
Right. Well, one of the things that we use, and generally it's a free type product, is that we like the gallon glass jars from the barbecue places, and you can also get them at some of the convenience stores. Pickles come in them quite a few times, and they're easy to clean, and for the most part, 99% of those lids will reseal. And there's two ways you can treat that. One, we just pour the grain, either the rice or wheat or pinto beans or lentils or whatever else dry products that we're using, straight in there, and then using one of the 1,500 cc oxygen eliminators or sorbers, that will actually pop a vacuum in about 5 or 10 minutes, and you can hear the audible clink of that lid going down. And if it doesn't really make any difference because it's not actively exchanging air from the outside, and all the oxygen will be removed. If you can't do that, I would suggest putting the beans and the rice into the gallon jars and stick it in the freezer for a couple of weeks and then take it back out. And the reason behind that is to keep any bug eggs that are actually in all of those products from hatching out and causing some damage, to your food stuff.
That the oxygen absorber stuff you're talking about, can you go into more detail? Like, what is that? Where do you find that?
You can buy those online. Generally, if you buy them online, they're like $1 a piece from most anybody. We get ours from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They allow non-members to buy, and you can buy 100 of the oxygen absorbers for 50 cents each. Mm-hmm. So, I'm sorry, for 10 cents each. And they are the 1,500 cc type. We have also put a 1,500 cc in a 5-gallon bucket and had it also pop a seal. So it's an inexpensive way to kind of ensure that your product is going to stay for a long time. Of course, the secondary way to do that is to keep it out of the light and keep it as cool as possible. And keeping it as cool as possible involves at least putting it on the floor. The floor generally runs a whole lot cooler than anything up higher.
How about, isn't dry ice a way you can do that too, to take the oxygen out?
Yes, you can use dry ice. I wouldn't use dry ice in anything less than a gallon jar. And if you take the small tuna fish container and take a paper towel and fold it in half and take a piece of the dry ice. Now, dry ice is very dangerous to handle. You can buy it in the local grocery store, but if you stick your bare finger on that, it's going to stick, and you're going to peel off your fingerprints and cause yourself a burn and a lot of pain. So you ought to handle it with gloves. And I like to just take a knife or a screwdriver and chunk off a piece about the size of a golf ball, maybe a little smaller, and stick it right in the middle of that paper towel, make an indentation down in the dried goods, and put the lid on, but not screw it down tight. If you screw it down tight, you're going to blow that glass all over the place. You want that gas to be able to expand and escape. And what you'll see if you line that up with a window is you'll see a vapor coming out of that. And what that is that's oxygen coming out of the edges of the top of the lid. And in about 15 minutes, you can very, very carefully and very slowly remove that lid and pull that tuna fish can out and the paper towel. The tuna fish can keeps any excess moisture that might drip off that that dry ice, which is just CO2 frozen. And then you can remove that from the container and very carefully put the lid back down. And essentially you have a gallon jar full of CO2.
Okay, so just to kind of review then, let's say we're using 5-gallon buckets, those 5-gallon plastic buckets with the sealable tops that you can get, food grade, right? And those are, I think those cost maybe $5 or something like that, $6.
Right.
And that's with a sealable lid. That's not even, you don't even have to seal that yourself with silicone or anything. You just get them. They usually have the rubber insert, and that's so right. you put your food in there. Now you don't even have to. Would you recommend, if you're using a 5-gallon bucket, that that you divide your food up into even smaller, pieces inside of that, so like for instance, you'd have balanced meals.
Plastic, yeah. Don't use plastic like the Ziploc bags, because after 4 or 5 years, those are going to start to disintegrate, and there's no way to get those little pieces of plastic out of your food product. A better product to use is a Mylar bag, and a Mylar bag can actually be sealed just with a standard iron, a smoothing iron.
Right, and what's an idea of the prices on the Mylar? Do you know?
I think that we paid 15 or 20 cents a piece for the quart bags, again from the LDS people.
Right. So what you can do is you could mix and match your meals in Mylar, iron those shut with just a standard clothing iron, and then put them in your 5-gallon bucket, and then you could just seal that up and not even worry about the oxygen, and you'd still be good for how long do you think if you did that?
We saw an article the other day, and it was a bunch of people that had some food stored for the last 25 years in one of the standard Sears little metal storage buildings that you screw together. So, that thing had to heat up to 120, 125 in the summertime and then freeze in the wintertime. And they pulled that out and actually sprouted some of the wheat that was in there.
Uh-huh.
So, I wouldn't say that you ought to do that. I would say that you ought to keep it either in the garage or some other place that's going to be at least fairly cool and fairly dark.
But the point is that you're good for at least a few years with just even doing that, not even worrying about, getting your oxygen out of there, right?
Sure.
So, and your biggest problem really with any of your grains, one of your problems certainly is weevils and like you said, making sure you don't have any eggs in there, right?
Right.
So that's the one thing about pulling the oxygen out that is good is you're going to kill all the chance for that to happen, I assume, too.
Right. And then the other thing is that you can go to the Mormon cannery, and they do let non-members in. It has to be by appointment. You can call the local bishop storehouse, and they can give you the hours. You have to pre-order what you're going to do, and you can actually can all of your product that you want to, all the way from dried milk to beans and rice, in number 10 cans, and they are sealed up with an oxygen absorber. So those kept dry, I'm not sure how long they would keep, 40, 50 years.
And you're saying you can purchase them that way right there?
So the cans end up about $1 each. The can and the lids and the oxygen absorber run about $1 each for however much product you put in it. But in my estimation, it's well worth it because you just open that can and they even supply a little plastic lid with it, and you can just reseal it with that plastic lid. Assuming you use it in the next month.
Right. And how would you go about finding an LDS cannery type place that you could do that?
It ought to also be in the Yellow Pages and the White Pages.
Okay.
Yeah, you can call it the Storehouse, Church of Jesus Christ, Latter-day Saint.
Right. Another thing, and we're kind of going for the worst case scenario here when we're talking about years and years. Now, I wanted to iterate, and you already kind of said this, but I think we should probably just really go into detail or be specific about it, is that it's really important that you rotate your food stores and that you use them, you eat them, and not only food, but we talked about the last conversation, we talked about water. And it's the same thing, we talked about how you could keep your water for a year or two in those containers. And I know that there are things you can put in there that are supposed to stabilize. They have like a product called, I think, Ion, that's sort of an oxygen stabilizer for the water. You can put in GSE, like grapefruit seed extract. I use that as a preservative in my herbal salves, and so there's things you can do to preserve that water or to help it. But the idea is really that you rotate it, and for two reasons. One is obviously you keep your water and you keep your food fresh by doing that. So you drink your water that you've got stored, you eat your food that you've got stored, and you do it on a regular basis. So maybe you make one day a week or one day a month. You make it a survival, preparedness meal. and maybe do it. It'd be better if you have a family or loved ones or people that you could do it and turn it into, a group meal is a much better way to do that, in my opinion. In other words, like the old adage in martial arts, train how you fight, how you'd want to fight. Well, same idea. I mean, practice how you would actually do it. How would you really take care of yourself if you had no electricity, no power for 3, 4 days, 5 days, a week, 2 weeks, whatever. And in order to do that right, you really need the group of people that you'd be around to do that. And so the first thing is, obviously, you keep your food stores fresh. So you're rotating your new stuff in, and of course you have it arranged in a way that allows you to do that, so that your oldest stuff is on the bottom or on the top or whatever. You label it, you date it, all of those things. I mean, a lot of that's just common sense, but you rotate in and out with your food stores and your water. And the second reason is you really need to know how to cook and how to eat that stuff. I mean, if you have 20 cases of MREs, the military MREs as your food store, and you've never eaten them before, you have no idea, and you're waiting for the disaster to come, and 2 years later it happens, or 5 years later or whatever, and you've got all those old MREs, and that's all you've got. You're not going to be as happy a camper as if you had taken the time to put in some dry your own food, or even if you're not drying your own food, just the things that Paul's just talked about so far with beans and rice and storing, and rotated your food in and out. You'd be comfortable with cooking it. You'd be comfortable with some different recipes. You would be comfortable with the taste, and you would have probably designed some meals that would make it easy for you to eat that. In other words, it would be very tasty. And here we come back into a topic that I've touched on more than once already in the podcast, and I think you'll hear it a lot, is the concept of morale and just your kind of your mental, attitude and focus in a preparedness or in a survival situation, and how important that is, so that if you're eating the same stuff every day and it's really, really hard to stomach, it's like either that or it's famine, your morale is going to be a lot different than if you've taken the time to actually have some recipes and have some meals that you like, and have some variety in there, and you're used to eating it, and you know what it's going to taste like, so there's no surprises.
That's right. I think they call that the same thing as culture shock. It's called food shock, where you're going from seriously processed foods, such as eating out all the time, to to foods that are not as much processed, that you're actually doing yourself. One of the things also, we talked a lot about dry foods, and I'm an advocate of dry foods. You have to understand that it's going to take twice as much water as you figured on. If you're figuring a gallon a day per person just for your drinking water, then you need to also figure in a gallon of water per person per day for cooking all of this, and then more importantly, cleaning your utensils. So, I would suggest to anybody that's going to do it just to take a month and go through your food stores and eat nothing but your food stores for a month. And that's going to tell you exactly how many pounds of whatever that you're going to go through. And another way to combat some of that food shock, and they are much more expensive than the Mormons are selling, but the Mormons, the LDS, only sell the basics. They sell beans and rice and wheat and flour, dried milk, hot chocolate, orange drinks, and stuff like that. You can buy like dried broccoli from Harvest Foods or from Walton Feeds. I believe there's a dealer here in town. They sell most of their stuff in number 10 cans. It's a little more expensive, but you can add some color to your meals, like of course for broccoli or cauliflower or anything like that.
That's right. And another thing, if you want to take it to the next level, excuse me, I've got kind of a dry throat here. If you want to take it to the next level in terms of drying food too, you really are going to have to get into drying your own food. And so there's a lot of different ways you can enter into that world. And that kind of goes back into the idea also of making your own meals. You can dry your own food based on your own recipes. So you were mentioning dried broccoli, but you can dry pretty much any vegetable, any meat, even most fruits. You can dry with, whether you have a food dryer, and there's a number of different ways. That's an entirely different conversation. But, I have a little cheap old, I think I got it for $80 or $90 an Excalibur, with like 4 or 5 trays in it. And that is more than enough, sufficient to be able to dry on a semi-regular basis foods, and then package them up in Mylar and put them in cans. And then you've got, like Paul said, you can pull that stuff out and practice that. And you don't have to necessarily do it for a month right off the bat. I mean, go in gradually. But if you're planning around, again, like we said before, if you're planning for a disaster, the best way to do it is to do it in small chunks. So plan for a 72-hour disaster, and just for the heck of it, even if all you can do is just eat all of your disaster food for one day, just do one day. And if you can do better than that, do 72 hours, and the thing, like Paul said, that's really important, is to note how much water you're using as well. And for that dried food, you absolutely will. And also keeping, of course, clean and hygiene is a big part of that too. Once you're cooking and eating with that food.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, one of the things that you can do that's really, really easy is that you can go to yard sales and pick up those little round dehydrators. They're generally all made by American Harvester. They just have different labels on them. And you can pick those things up for like $5. They have 4 or 5 trays in them. They're efficient enough to dry whatever you want. And everybody knows, you go buy a stalk of celery, well, you use 2 or 3 pieces off of it, and the rest of it is pretty well not used. And you can just simply chop that up, throw it in a tray, and turn the dehydrator on, and come back in a couple of days. We also hump the yard sales for pint and quart canning jars. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go into a canning mode, but for 10 cents or 15 cents, you can buy lids that will go on those, fresh new lids. And when you dehydrate your stuff, I like to put it in warm. And if you put it in warm, then when it cools, it'll actually pull a slight vacuum on that. And if you're just doing a tray or 2 or 3 or 4 at a time, then those little pint jars make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, right. That's a great trick. I didn't even know about that one. So yeah, you dry it, and then you put it in there warm, and that gets you your seal.
Right. It won't pull the same seal as if you're pressure canning it, but it will pull enough of a seal that it's pulling enough vacuum that it won't pop back up. And you're now into a pint container that's probably cost you 20, 25 cents total. You see those things, people, even the pint and the half pint containers that had the coffee cup handle on, people made them into coffee mugs and whatever. Those are just as good as anything else. So, that's an easy way to get into it. And, because I'm a dumpster diver, I have to go through that 10-step program every 6 months because I'm a dumpster diver. But I salvage a lot of excellent stuff from the grocery store. It's just got a slight blemish on it. And, it's nothing to pull 25 or 30 tomatoes with a slight bruise on them. You cut the bruise out. If that bothers you, it dehydrates it just like everything else. And slice it 1/4 inch thick and throw it on the dehydrator. And a couple of days later, you've got dried tomatoes. And one of the things that we found when our kids was growing up, that we had to actually put the pantry under lock and key because the kids would go in there and eat all the dried tomatoes, and the strangest part, they would eat all the dried onions. So,
actually, dried onions are good. They are.
They put it back on the shelf, but it was empty.
Right. That's something that's really easy if you want to get into doing your own food. Start there. Like Paul was saying, even the stuff that almost is the throwaway, like the celery stuff that you're not using, but you can chop that stuff up, your onions, your tomatoes, all your veggies, and then even some cooked meat, and basically you just make your own soups. You dry that stuff, put it in the dehydrator, dry it up, and then put it in a small mason jar, whatever you want to do, whether it's a quart size or pint size, and there you go. And then throw some spices in there too. You can just mix the spices right up in there with it, some salt and some, or even just, some kind of spice mixes that you can get. And there you've got kind of a spicy soup that's got all of your nutrients. It's got all your calories, got vitamins. It's got everything you need in there. And all you basically need to do is add water and cook it.
That's right, and it's so very simple. You know, when we cook pinto beans, we always have a cup full of pinto beans left over, and you can take those and put them in a strainer and let them drip dry totally, and stick those in the dehydrator, and they dehydrate up. And you can do one or two things with them after they're dehydrated. You can either leave them alone and throw them in that soup mix like you were talking about, or you can actually use them as refried beans. You just simply reconstitute them and mash them up, and you have instant refried beans.
Right. That's right. So, and, yeah, you can kind of do the same thing with potatoes, too.
Right, right. And any cooked meat is safe. Now, when we get into uncooked meat, my recommendation is that you stick with beef. You can do fish and get away with it, but, you know, pork really kind of bothers me. If you very carefully and read something, label all of your containers, you know, this must be cooked first on your pork, then you're probably okay. But, you know, just dehydrating it doesn't cook pork, nor does it cook beef, nor does it cook chicken.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we were talking here about cooking the meat first and then dehydrating it.
Right, right. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. The only thing is, of course, you're going to lose some nutrients in the soup mix that's coming out of that. But then we always just pour that in a dog bowl and stir a little dog food in it, and that gives the dogs a little extra boost. Right.
And then we're not probably even going to get into it here, but because it's really more of kind of a primitive level thing. But of course, you can get into smoking the meats as well, and making jerkies and doing that. But I think probably we'll just stick with what people would do in an urban setting in their kitchen. And I think that covers quite a bit. That's pretty good.
We're going to divide this discussion up into several more digestible pieces of about 20 to 30 minutes each. So this is the end of this particular part, and we will pick it back up tomorrow or the next weekday. Thank you. Bye.
Have you ever wanted to generate your own supply of electrical power, even save money on your electric bill? If so, this is going to be the most important message you will ever hear. Solar power generators are now available. These emergency backup systems provide life-saving electrical power when you need it most. Unlike gas generators, a solar generator runs quietly, emits no fumes, and produces electricity from the sun. It's like having an electric power plant running quietly in your own home. Run sump pumps, shortwave radios, computers, and even keep your food from spoiling. Whether it's hurricanes, ice storms, brownouts, or blackouts, you'll never suffer through painful power outages again. And here's the best news, a remarkable fall truckload sale going on right now that gets you $1,700 in bonuses when you buy a solar generator. To find out why solar generators are the best generators and get $1,700 for doing so, go to falltruckloadsale.com. That's falltruckloadsale.com. Generate your own supply of electricity. Go to falltruckloadsale.com. That's falltruckloadsale.com.
One thing I wanted to talk about briefly too on this, speaking of dried and foods that store for a long time, don't take up a lot of room because we get the moisture out, is seeds, sprouts.
Right.
So one thing to do is to think about that. Of course, there's sprouting mixes, but there's also seeds that by themselves, like chia seeds, are famous for this, are really very nutritious. They're high in protein, they're high in caloric value, they're high in vitamins, and a lot of nutrients in them. And so the chia seeds themselves, you could take them and you add, it's a ratio of about 1 to 9 or 1 to 10 of water that you add to them, and they make a sort of a slurry that you can drink, sort of a smoothie as such. And it's not the most delightful taste. It's not bad. It's just they're kind of bland, but you can put them in. Like what I have is I have a lot of chia seeds, and I have those. You've probably seen them, the vitamin C packets, the super energy C type things. I can't remember what they're called, but there's, you've got those, and you can throw those into basically a glass of water, or 16 ounces of water is equal to about a third of a cup of chia seeds, which is about 2 or 3 tablespoons full of chia seeds, and that right there is about 450, 500 calories and a lot of vitamins. And then you throw in that vitamin C mix because it kind of at least gives you a flavor to it. It's not otherwise it's kind of like drinking tofu or something. And so you've got that. But on top of that, you've got seeds for sprouting as well. So whether you use the seeds directly and eat them or put them in water and drink them like the chia seeds, or whether you actually sprout them and then you eat the sprouts, which of course are loaded with vitamins and also have plenty of caloric content to them as well, lots of carbs. So I've gotten a lot of value out of that as well. And so you start off with nothing more than just seeds which store very easily and are dry, of course, and then going back to the concept of the fact that we have to make sure we've got plenty of water to sprout them and or to mix them with.
Yes, that's entirely correct. And of course, you know that when you sprout a seed, any seed, it doubles the nutritional value. Plus, depending on how long you let the little sprout go out, depends on how much vitamin C you get out of it. I mean, you can quadruple your vitamin C by just waiting several days. Now, there's one thing that a lot of people don't know about wheat is that you can go ahead and sprout it till the sprout is about an inch long, and then mash that up. It doesn't have to be like a paste, but just mash it up where it's kind of uniform in texture, and you can actually bake it at that point, and it's self-rising. And it makes a very interesting, nutty-tasting loaf, and of course, the nutritional value is just phenomenal compared to, let's say, white bread.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up because that's those are the types of things too that when you go back to just the concept of morale and the mental aspect of preparedness and survival and stuff. Bread is something that in our culture in the United States is really a fairly important staple for us. We're a wheat-based food. We're a food kind of society and culture. And so anything you can do, if it's kind of an easy bake bread, where you don't have to, as anybody who bakes bread, knows, it does take a little bit of skill and knowledge and experience to be a decent bread baker. At least I think it does. So that's a good one.
Yeah, and you can bake bread the old Mideastern way by starting a pretty good fire on a hot rock and getting that rock hot, and then putting whatever you want, whatever kind of mixture from the sprouts to actually ground up flour or corn, and put it on the rock, and that will also tend to be self-rising to a point, and you just flip it over when it gets brown on the bottom. So instead of having to have an oven, that's an easy way to cook it. Right,
and it's sort of the modified. I mean, my own, about as much as I contribute to the art of bread baking is flatbread on a rock, which I'm decent. I'm good at that. Anybody can do that. It's basically cooking a pancake. But that, if you can get, like you said, especially with the ground up wheat sprout, if you can get a flour out of that is actually self-rising, then you've really kind of taken that whole art and science of yeast and rising and dough rising and all of that out of the equation.
Yeah, and along with that, and of course there's not a lot of it down in our part of the country because the coastal Bermuda is pretty well taken over, but a little north of here and a little west, there's a grass called curly mesquite or buffalo grass, and you can take a pair of clippers and clip that down within about a half inch of the ground, and take those dried stalks, they're about 1.5 to 2 inches long and curly, into a flour. And it's actually a self-rising biscuit that will surprise you how far it will rise up. It will rise up some 3/4 to an inch, just with the properties of that. It has a really delightful nutty taste, and when it's available, I really prefer it to wheat biscuits.
Right. Yeah, that's I kind of the same here with mesquite flour is the flavor I really have grown to love since coming down here to Texas.
Right. So there's a lot of different ways, to do that and to look at it. And one of the things that I really like about dried foods, now don't get me wrong, we store a lot of what we call wet foods. We have been going down to AAA Salvage down on Presa Street in San Antonio and buying cases of the number 10 cans. Now, to feed a number 10 can, you need probably 6 or 7 people to feed that to or more. But on the other hand, when you're buying those cans for $1 to $3 a can, that stretches your food quite a bit. For instance, last month, our total grocery bill was $28. And we were living off of food stores. Not that we had to. It just worked out. I didn't have a chance to go to the grocery store.
Right. That's the nice thing about when you've got when you've got a big pantry of stored preparedness food, is you can be lazy and not have to go to the store once in a while. Give yourself that break.
Right. Right.
So yeah, and it's I wanted to move in also. You probably got more to say on this too, but just to bring it up, something to bear in mind also is preparedness for your pets in terms of food. That's something. Well, of course, water in terms of the amount also, but the food itself, is if you've got cats, you've got dogs, that's something that you've got to really think about as well, and also rotating your food stores through on that. Now that's a lot simpler. You don't have to go through all of the nearly as much of the worry about the mental side of things, what we talked about with changing the diet around and the meal and all that, how things taste and testing it out. But you do have to have amounts. You've got to get the big bags and rotate your dog food through that. So you've got, if you've got dogs, that you've got enough food to take care of them for the same amount of time that you're trying to take care of yourself.
Yes, that's right. And a lot of people don't realize that you can actually feed dogs beans and rice. And if you've got a bouillon cube to throw in there, they really like that. And it's a good, nutritious meal.
It's actually good for them. I know beans, rice, and even corn. I mean, we throw that in once in a while, like maybe once a week, into our dogs' food, just leftovers, and they love it. And I think it's healthy for them. Yes,
one of the things that people don't really realize is that your dog is an important part of your family, in that they hear things that you will never hear, and they see things that you won't see. And so not only is my dog my friend, but he's also my guardian. And whether or not they would attack somebody is totally immaterial, is that they raise a ruckus and alert you to the fact that something's going on.
That's right. Not only that, I think this reminds me, just to kind of back up for a second, but I had an email a long time ago, I don't know, maybe a year ago or so, from a producer who was going to do a show on survival with dogs, and they wanted me to send them like a demo tape, on how I would do that. And I kind of introduced, as you know, we have 7 dogs here. They're all rescue dogs, all very well trained, voice command. I never use a leash, and so. In doing that and in kind of thinking about that, what, and the question was on the demo, this is why I bring it up, the question was, well, how would you use a dog or dogs in a survival situation? What is it about dogs that's so good about that? And what you just said, I think, is 90% of it, if nothing else. They are your eyes and ears and your nose. They're the awareness. And I mentioned this before, that I always say this, that awareness and adaptability are the 2 greatest survival skills you can have. If you know that there's trouble coming long before it gets there, or what's going on, not necessarily even trouble, but you just know that there are, maybe you're just trying to find people. Maybe you need to find other people that are going to, to band together to help each other out, and you just don't, and people walk by a block away, and because your hearing isn't good enough, you don't even know they're there, So, I mean, it's not necessarily always defense that we're talking about. It's just that awareness. So there's that. And then there's really the security of a dog, or several dogs. I mean, I had a friend visited our house for the first time, and he came to the front door, and there was, 7 dogs basically barking at him through the window. And I came around from the back, and he came up. He was laughing. He was like, "Man, a burglar would be insane to come up to jump and try to break into your house." And it's true, I mean, even just a couple of dogs, people think twice about it, because the dog doesn't know. As far as the dog's concerned, it's on, and so the person has to first of all have that in mind, and then be able to deal with that, and know that they're going to give themselves away. Even if they're going to shoot at them, they're still going to be giving themselves away ahead of time. So I think a dog is a very, very important aspect of survival and preparedness myself.
Oh, I agree. I train my dogs, especially when I'm walking out in the country, to walk in front of me, and the idea behind that is that that dog is going to sense a rattlesnake or some other danger long before that I'll hear it. And, you know, my dog is my friend, but I would certainly rather have my dog get bit by a rattlesnake than either me or somebody in my group. And a dog has a whole lot better chance of surviving a rattlesnake bite, you know, than a human does.
That's right.
So you know, in that respect, you know, they're really valuable, especially in our group.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, when you're planning your food and you're, you know, stocking up your pantry, you know, keep that as part of it, you know, and so when you're going out and shopping, so the big investment really comes, I find, the first time around. You just basically, if you're out there when you're shopping, you're always looking for, you know, good deals, for cheap stuff, for buy one get one free coupon type stuff, and just set that stuff aside, you know, and then have a way of just a common sense kind of methodical way of rotating things in and out of there as you realize or as you feel like it's time to kind of freshen up the pantry, you know. We're going to talk about first aid, not necessarily this time around, but we are going to talk about that, and you'll hear me say this again, you know, that you don't just make a first aid kit and stick it in the cabinet and forget about it. You know, you use that first aid kit, you pull stuff out of it, you refresh it, so that when you open it up, you aren't dealing with bandages that are 3 years old, and that you know where things are at. So you're not, you know, rummaging through a gigantic first aid kit that you don't even remember because it's been 3 years since you packed it. So same idea with your food. You know everything that's there, you're familiar with it, and you're constantly, you know, putting stuff in, taking stuff out, cooking with it, and understanding all those aspects of it.
Yeah, that's totally true. You know, and we carry a first aid kit, actually a fairly large first aid kit, in each one of our vehicles, because you just never know when you're going to need it. You know, you might run across a wreck, and that one bandage, you know, with a couple of 4x4s as a pressure bandage might be just the thing that would save someone's life. And of course, under the Texas law, you know, you're part of that Good Samaritan Act, and you don't have any real responsibility for, you know, if you either made a mistake or the person just died anyhow. So I always stop at a wreck, you know, especially if the ambulance and the fire department and the police have not gotten there, because you just don't know when you can, you know, be of assistance to someone.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's, you know, and that kind of goes back. Actually, we could take that concept and back up for a second with the food and talk about, you know, food in the car too, food and water in the car, and maybe that's a good place. I'm not sure where you're at on that or what you guys haul around. If you always have a specific set of food and water that you haul with you in the car.
Yes, we do. We always haul a couple of gallons of water in each car, and then we also have crackers and peanut butter just as a mainstay. You never know when, you know, you're going to have a flat and be on the side of the road for, you know, all night. And then of course, in our bug-out bag, which is also in each car, we have at least 5 days' supply of food. And of course, with the knowledge that both of us have, one, you know, from our Special Forces experience, and then two, attending your herbology classes, there's food everywhere. So for us, it's not such an important thing to have a lot of food in the car. Maybe I would suggest to people that if you're going to have food in the car, that would be a good place to carry your MREs.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, actually, and I agree. I think that MREs are very well suited for a car type of emergency. And plus, if you never, I mean, sometimes it's the kind of thing where you just need you never know. You know, you're on a road trip, and you just, you know, you're for one reason or another, you need some food, you know, and there's you got 5 or 6 MREs in there, and again, you're going to rotate through it, so that's a good chance to try out an MRE meal. And I mean, as much as I don't like trying out MRE meals, I have to say, at least it's food, it's calories, right?
Right. Yeah, it's you know, we teasingly call it meals rejected by Ethiopians.
Right.
And, I think they're pretty horrible, and about the only way I can eat them is just put a lot of hot sauce on them. But on the other hand, it is calories. One MRE is actually around 3,000 calories, if I remember correctly, and you know, you can make it pretty easily on one MRE a day.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we had to do that. I'm sure you've had to do that too. And of course, when you were in, they were doing the C-rats, and when I first came in, it was C-rats also. But MREs, when I was in the Q course, that was about it for a period of time. There was times where we didn't even have that, especially during phase 3. I remember, because we were being chased all the time, basically, and the food drops never got there. So one MRE a day was actually really nice to have, if you had that much, and certainly you can do that. This is one of the things too. I think it's a good time to just bring this up, and we brought this up with the level 1 hunter-gatherer class that's been going on this summer, and the first weekend of that, everybody pretty much went hungry. We had some foraged food, but that didn't agree with everybody that well, and it was a good learning experience for people, and I wanted them to learn it that way, that just because the food is edible, that it says it's edible in the book, there's a big difference between that and the fact that your body is used to it, or that you're able to eat it, either because of your own personal constitution or just the fact that you're not used to it because you just haven't eaten it. And that was I had that hard lesson myself, whatever it was, 20, 25 years ago, when I was out there really testing my own edible plant skills in the mountains of Colorado. That was a real hard lesson for me, and so I wanted everybody to have that. And the second lesson on that, though, that's I think even more important, is that you're fine once you get over that initial hunger pangs. You're going to be fine without food for a few days. It's not going to kill you to be hungry, and you might feel kind of weak, and you need to reserve your strength. You don't want to, like they say, ration sweat, not water. You want to be careful how much you put out for energy if you don't have to, but that's really how you should be anyway. And so it's a good idea to, I think, for everybody to go ahead and make yourself go hungry for 24 hours, at least, and maybe an entire weekend. And I know a lot of people hear this and say, oh yeah, right. But if you don't try it, if you don't do it once, when it's comfortable and when you're already, living in your air-conditioned home and everything, you're really going to be in for a little bit of a culture shock when it's hot, you're really tired. There may be, all kinds of things going on. Your loved ones, maybe someone got hurt, somebody, got cut or whatever, and there's a Hurricane Katrina type thing. Everything that's after a hurricane that's out there is basically an infection waiting to happen. So you've got all of that stuff going on, and then you push in the fact that you're hungry too, and so I think mentally it's a really good thing for everybody to do on the topic of food, to starve themselves just a little bit and understand what that's like.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And, especially like if you're foraging, you ought to eat very little, a couple times a day.
Right. And it's
kind of work into it. Because, I heard a lot of reports from that hunter-gatherer class, and there were quite a few people that had a little gastric distress.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and one of my first lessons really on it was the fact that foraged food is much more nutrient dense than the food we eat off the farm or off the, certainly from the supermarket aisle, or even in our own garden. It's very nutrient dense. Now, it's not necessarily high in caloric, high in calories, and we need those calories too, of course, but the nutrients are just very dense. And so that can be a bit of a shock to your system, even in itself, with having the low calories, high nutrients too. So it's just a matter of getting used to all of that, I think. And so these are things that, along with preparedness, it doesn't take any money, obviously. It doesn't take any money to starve yourself for 24 hours. So, these are things that are, again, we always come back to this, but I think it's really important to do so, that we always come back to kind of the mental game.
Yep, I agree. I agree with that. That's why we carry at least 5 days supply of food for each person that would probably be in the car. So essentially that's like 10 days supply of food for us.
Right.
But, we can leave that stuff kind of scattered between the vehicles, just as an emergency. I mean, it was some time ago that we handed out some food to a guy that was on the road. He didn't have any food, obviously hadn't eaten in several days. So we just kind of left him some food and kind of helped him out. But so there's all kinds of use for that food.
That's right. That's another good point too, and it's it kind of goes back to where we started on this when we were talking about homeless people and the homeless challenge and all of that, and that gets back into the mental side of it too. And it's nice to help out people like that and have the stuff to help them with, and not just give people money. I'm not so keen on that because you never know how the money gets spent. But if you give them food, you know that you're actually really helping them out.
Oh, I agree.
But well, good. Is there anything else that you can think of we need to talk about on this topic this time around? Or
no, next time we've of course got other topics that we can talk about, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Well, this is good. And if you're not already familiar with a lot of the courses that we're talking about, all of the stuff gets filtered through basically what we call the core basic or the core courses, which is there's an urban core basic and there's a primitive core basic. Paul teaches the urban core basic. I teach the primitive core basic, and they're two different kind of tracks, but they both deal with a lot of the things we're talking about. That a lot of the information is applicable across whether you're living in the woods or trying to, or whether you're trying to survive in an urban area. I mean, there's some basic common sense stuff that applies no matter where you're at, and a lot of survival, in my opinion, is just learning how to think on your feet, and it's just a lot of common sense as well. So that's if you're not familiar with those, with kind of what we're all about there, then make sure you check us out at thehumanpath.com. And until next time, I'm not sure what our next discussion topic will be, but it'll be something on this same urban scenario. I think we probably got still a couple things we could talk about on this. I don't. Do you, Paul? You want to talk some more about this next time?
We've got a lot of things that we can talk about and get into a lot of depth with. So for my part, I hope that we see you in class fairly soon. Thank you all.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Goodbye.